Tonight, the White House holds a social media summit as the president lashes out against what he calls the fake news media.
Iran better be careful.
This as Iran wages a new aggression campaign in the Persian Gulf, putting the world on edge.
And as they prepare to go to church, they feel very threatened and scared by these raids.
Conditions fester on the southern border as the Trump administration plans a rash of family deportations.
Playing chicken with our debt ceiling year after year is not the right way to do this.
And we talk to the lawmaker who says Congress needs to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether.
This is ridiculous. It looks like Venice out here.
New Orleans underwater. The tropical storm set to turn into a hurricane tomorrow, threatening the Big Easy. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
You're challenging the media gatekeepers and the corporate censors to bring the facts straight to the American people, and that's what you're doing. You're going right to the people.
Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. President Trump playing host at the White House today at a summit on social media. The invitation list, including conservative voices like the Heritage Foundation and internet personalities, some known for pushing conspiracy theories.
Not invited, though, some of the biggest names in the social sphere like Facebook and Twitter. The president is a frequent critic of tech companies censoring conservative viewpoints. He took a dig at them and the media today, tweeting, "The fake news is not as important or as powerful as social media." Today, CBN News political analyst David Brody spoke with one of the invitees to the summit. Take a look.
Joining us now, the Vice President of Communications for the Heritage Foundation, Rob Bluey, who will be at today's summit. Rob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Well, what's the goal? What do you hope to kind of get out of this and the takeaway at the end of all of this, Rob?
Number one, I'd like to hear some of the other examples of bias from some of the other participants who will be at the White House today. And secondly, I think it's an opportunity to get conservatives together, convene this meeting, and hopefully talk about some solutions. And I hope those solutions don't involve the government coming in and stepping in, because I think that's probably a heavy-handed role for the government to play when it comes to, addressing some of the concerns that will be talked about at today's summit.
For sure. There is one thing you just mentioned about bias. What about examples that the Heritage Foundation, the Daily Signal, obviously part of the Heritage Foundation, that you have experienced or that folks over there have seen? Can you give some examples and maybe something you might want to share with the president as well?
Well, we sure do have examples, David, and I expect if I'm given the opportunity to plan to share them with the president today. I think the most notable example is the Daily Signal published a video last year with a pediatrician talking about the dangers of giving puberty blockers to kids. The video went viral on Facebook. In fact, it reached 70 million views when all of a sudden it disappeared. And we took our case to Facebook. We said, why did you take this down off of your platform? It took Facebook a little while to get back to us, but eventually they did restore the video and apologized for doing that. But more recently, David, we had a colleague of mine who was on Twitter using it, was accused of hateful conduct on Twitter. We said, this can't possibly be hateful conduct. What are you talking about? And it took about a week, but Twitter eventually restored his account and apologized to him. And I think that in both of these cases, it was because of the content that we as conservatives believe in.
I want to ask you, Rob, a little bit about this list. The media has made a big deal about extremists. That's what they put in. They put it in quotes. Extremists attending this White House social media summit. Obviously, Heritage Foundation. They don't mention you guys, but there are others on that list that they think are considered extremists. What do you make of that and trying to be lumped in with all of that?
Well, it's no surprise to hear that a media that typically hates Donald Trump trying to position this in a way that would have negative effects in terms of some of the attendees. Look, I mean, I can't speak to all of them, and I don't even frankly know who's going to be there. I'll find out as the summit kicks off, to be honest with you, David. But I can say this. I mean, as the Heritage Foundation, we're proud of the fact that we are the #1 ranked think tank in the world for our best use of the internet.
I know there's concern about how Google and others on the internet mess with the algorithms to mess up conservatives, and that leads to bias. Can you explain a little bit about that?
That's certainly a big factor, and I expect it to come up today. President Trump has said that, that's one of his primary concerns about Google. What it means is when you type in a search question to Google, Google will have an algorithm that gives you the answer. And if you don't have conservative sources or you have biased sources that are coming back, chances are you're influencing public opinion and people's perspective on certain issues. So that is a concern that a big tech company could employ when it comes to search results.
Rob Bluey with the Heritage Foundation. Have fun over there at the White House Social Media Summit. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, David.
Well, tonight, word that Iran tried to block a British warship in the Persian Gulf deepens ongoing tensions with the regime.
Even though the attempt was unsuccessful, experts say it's all part of Iran's strategy. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us now with a closer look. Hi, Eric.
Well, Jenna and John, this incident happened just days after Iran increased its level of uranium enrichment, which violates the nuclear deal reached with Iran. It's just the latest in a string of actions that seem to be growing more aggressive.
The Royal Navy has been protecting British interests in the Gulf for many decades.
British military officials say Wednesday 3 Iranian vessels tried to block a commercial tanker from going through the Strait of Hormuz, but retreated after getting a warning from a British naval warship.
To counter them, it's very challenging, and the Iranians tend to use an asymmetric approach. That means that they will use a multiplicity of small vessels, and we are, of course, prepared for that.
It marks the first time a Western warship and American ally came close to a military clash with Iranian naval forces since tensions began rising recently between Iran and the U.S. The Strait of Hormuz is a major thoroughfare for international commerce.
Anyone that uses gas to heat their homes, anyone that goes to Primark to buy their clothes, they are wearing the stuff that comes through that choke point, 20 million barrels a day.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard denies trying to block any commercial ships. This all follows Iran's move to increase uranium enrichment to levels that violate the nuclear deal that Iran now wants revamped. Iran's economy is faltering under U.S. sanctions, which the ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency calls economic terrorism.
The sadistic tendency of the United States to use illegal unilateral sanctions as an instrument to coerce sovereign states and private entities should come to an end.
Iran is very frustrated because sanctions are having a huge impact on its economy.
David Adesnik is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He says any action on behalf of Iran is designed to stack the negotiation deck when it comes to a new or revamped nuclear deal.
To push the U.S. back into negotiations on Iran's terms of lifting sanctions or giving permission for their nuclear program to go forward in certain ways.
U.S. officials call Iran's recent actions extortion tactics and misbehavior that must not be rewarded. Adesnik says part of Iran's strategy of misbehavior could also be long-term. For example, instilling enough fear in the West that if Democrats win the White House, that they might concede to some of the Iranian demands. John and Jim.
All right, Eric, thank you. Well, after a long legal battle, President Trump is dropping his fight to include a citizenship question on the 2020 census. The decision comes in the wake of a dizzying couple of weeks that started when the Supreme Court blocked the question last month. After initially acknowledging the census would be printed without the citizenship question, President Trump reversed course and announced his team would explore other ways to include it, reportedly even considering an executive order.
Well, the White House is planning to deport undocumented families starting Sunday. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents will be arresting thousands as planned nationwide raids are set to go into effect Sunday. The deportations, according to the New York Times, will be conducted over multiple days in at least 10 major cities. Family members arrested together will be held in family detention centers in Texas and Pennsylvania. ICE is targeting some 2,000 immigrants who've been ordered deported but remain in the country illegally.
Well, tonight, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is calling on Hispanic evangelicals to plead with President Trump to stop these planned raids after she credited the Hispanic evangelicals today for the president's decision to call off the first round of deportations.
When you announced this before, I called, God bless you, some people of faith about this, evangelicals who support the president for other reasons, but who have been good on immigration issues, but usually. And basically, they were very concerned that this goes too far because these raids were not what they signed up for with President Trump. And I think their calls to the president made a difference.
Will you appeal to the president, though, to put off these raids?
I'm going to appeal to the people of faith, the faith-based organizations, to appeal to the president. I think that they put him in office and they had a better voice for this.
And Speaker Pelosi today said evangelical leaders told her many of the families facing deportation Sunday will be in church.
Well, joining us now is CBN News reporter Heather Sells, who's reported from the border and covers evangelical issues extensively. Heather, first question for you. The administration has announced these planned raids starting Sunday. What can you tell us about the raids and who they're targeting?
Well, as you just mentioned, that they're going to be very limited, but I just want to touch on what we just heard from Speaker Pelosi, which I just about fell out of my chair when I heard it. She's publicly crediting these Hispanic evangelicals, and that's very interesting because they've been extremely influential. They're members of the president's faith advisory group, and they are also working with Speaker Pelosi, and she's crediting them for stopping the last raid. And I talked with Reverend Tony Suarez this afternoon. He said they are still working with the White House to get them to stop this Sunday's raid. And they are working with members of Congress on immigration reform, which is ultimately their ultimate priority. And Tony Suarez told me he thinks the president may be pushing this raid as a way to really push Congress to move on the issue of immigration reform.
Heather, Franklin Graham just announced that Samaritan's Purse is working with immigrants on both sides of the border, and you've covered border ministries as well. Can you talk about the extent of the work they're doing down there, along with the border with the migrant communities?
I think it's a well-kept secret that evangelicals are very involved on the border, trying to reach out to immigrants as much as they can. Evangelicals get bashed on this issue. There was a Pew poll that came out recently that said very few evangelicals care about refugees compared to other groups. But what you're seeing, and I've seen this in El Paso, in McAllen, in San Diego, churches there are ministering to immigrants that are on that side of the border. And now with the president's new Remain in Mexico policy, they're also reaching out to connect with their sister churches in Mexico. Franklin Graham's announcement is somewhat of a surprise. He had been pressured by some Christian big names like Nicole Nordman and Shane Claiborne to do some work with immigrant children. And now he's saying, yes, on both sides of the border, Samaritan's Purse is going to be working with these children. And there's other evangelical churches and bigger ministries that are working with them as well. So very interesting to see this collaboration coming forward.
All right. Thank you, Heather, from our Virginia Beach newsroom.
And joining us now for more are Tom Bevan, founder and president of Real Clear Politics, and David Brody, CBN's chief political analyst. David, you heard her there. Heather said she just about fell out of her seat when she saw Nancy Pelosi giving credit to Hispanic evangelicals. This is a big deal.
It's a big deal. Hispanic evangelicals have been in Donald Trump's ear. They are also Nancy Pelosi's ear. That's the fall out of your seat part, but it's true. And so, you know, evangelicals were very instrumental on DACA in terms of when Trump was looking to just do away with it. And they said, well, let's hold on for a moment. And so they kind of pulled back the reins on that. So we'll see how this all plays out. There's a lot more to say about the ICE raids, but I know we have a lot more to talk about.
Tom, there's a little bit of a public all-out feud between some newcomers in Congress and Speaker Pelosi. AOC and her, quote, liberal squad describing Pelosi singling out the 4 women of color as outright disrespectful and demoralizing. If this continues to play out in the public, how might this affect their bid to gain inroads on Capitol Hill and also to oust President Trump from the Oval Office in 2020?
It's a great question. I mean, it's fascinating to watch this whole thing play out, right? Because there are, for as much as we talk about fissures within the Republican Party, there are now fissures within the Democratic Party, and they are affecting not only what's going on in Congress, but what's going on in the 2020 race. And it's really remarkable to see Nancy Pelosi go to the New York Times, Maureen Dowd, and give this interview where she sort of smacks AOC, and then AOC comes back and goes to the Washington Post, right, basically, after Nancy Pelosi has a meeting and says, hey, let's keep our internal discussions, our discussions internally. If we have disagreements, don't go tweeting about them, whatever. So AOC turns around and goes to the Washington Post and plays the race card against Nancy Pelosi and says but she's targeting women of color. It's remarkable, and it just shows that this is going to continue, and you have the battle between the sort of centrists and the pragmatists in the Democratic Party, of which Nancy Pelosi is the leader, and these, I don't want to call them rogue agents, but they're certainly the progressive wing of the party. They're not interested in party unity. They're not interested in necessarily passing legislation for that sake. They're interested in moving the conversation and driving the values and the morals of the Democratic Party to the left.
Tom, the president is backing down on his bid to bring about this citizenship question on the census. Is this a concession on his part?
It is. No question. This is something that Donald Trump has had an issue that's been front and center. He's basically pulled every lever that he can to try and make this happen. Has been rebuffed by the courts at every turn. But while he is pulling back, it is certainly not an issue that's going to go away. It's an issue that he's going to leverage in the 2020 campaign, right? He can rail against the judiciary, the bias in the judiciary. He will also be able to rail against political correctness, because for his supporters, it's a no-brainer. Why should we not be able to ask people if they're in this country, if they're citizens of this country? Right. And I think that's a majority position in the country. So while Donald Trump is retreating, in this battle, he has not given up the war.
David, we've only got about 15 seconds left, but final word, we rarely see a concession like this from Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is unusual, but, you know, at some point politically, he's going to win here, as Tom said, and the judiciary is key here. He's just going to say, look, I'm fighting. The courts are killing me every single time. Right. He's already won, at least politically speaking.
All right, David Brody and Tom Bevan, thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
Next, Congress is careening toward another fundraising deadline, while one lawmaker says it's time to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just hop on a plane and fly to a third world country and hand out food and medicine to the needy? And wouldn't it be great if some of those people came to know Jesus as their Savior because of your help? And wouldn't it be great if you could help out people like this all around the world every day? Wouldn't that make you feel great? And what if you could do all of this without having to leave your home or write monthly checks? Well, you can. Partner with CBN and you can help spread the gospel all around the world and make it a better place. And when you sign up for Pledge Express, your contribution will be deducted from your bank account every month automatically. It's a safe and simple way to make a difference. Plus, wouldn't it be great to get life-changing teachings every month from Pat and Gordon? When you sign up for Pledge Express, you'll save time and money, and you won't just sit around and watch the world go by. You'll help change it for the glory of God. Now, wouldn't that be great?
When you care, souls are set free. When you give, lives are made new. When you share, eternal life begins. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Welcome back. The U.S. is getting closer to hitting its debt limit quicker than expected, and that could force an early vote on the issue.
For more on that, we go now to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Abigail Robertson, on Capitol Hill.
Well, many lawmakers think with the U.S. Treasury set to run out of borrowing money by mid-September, just a few legislative days after they return from August recess, they can't wait until the brink to vote to raise the debt ceiling. And some, like Senator Chris Coons, advocate it's time to eliminate the debt ceiling altogether.
For us to default on America's sovereign debt would have significant consequences. One of the reasons that more countries and more investors around the world invest in American Treasury instruments is because we are seen as the most reliable issuer of government debt on earth. And to default on that debt would certainly harm that and increase our costs of borrowing. Folks who think we should continue to have a debt ceiling and be forced to vote on the debt ceiling believe that because they're concerned, as I am, about our deficits and our national debt. We should find responsible and bipartisan mechanisms to put in place reductions in our spending and our deficits. Coming right up against the debt ceiling, playing chicken with our debt ceiling year after year is not the right way to do this.
Neither Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi or Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have indicated yet whether or not we'll see a vote to address the issue this month or if they'll hold off until September.
Coming up, how following a principle called the Billy Graham rule landed one candidate for governor in a whole lot of hot water. Stay tuned.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Mississippi Republican gubernatorial candidate Robert Foster says he was following the Billy Graham rule when he refused to let a female reporter go on a campaign ride-along with him unless she agreed to bring along a colleague. Foster says he had promised his wife he would never be alone with another woman and said his campaign is too short-staffed to guarantee a third person would always be allowed in the truck or to be able to go in the truck for the 15-hour trip. In a phone interview, Foster told us he understands why the reporter, Larson Campbell, might be offended, but added that in the end, it's his truck, his rules.
He acted as if that was a attack against her and not a something that they were even willing to compromise on. But the thing about it is they were the ones that asked me for the interview. I didn't ask them for the interview, so I just simply put that one stipulation on it and asked that they comply with that if they want to ride in my truck, because, you know, in the end, it's my truck, so it's my rule.
And Foster also told CBN News he would have tried to accommodate the reporter by finding a campaign volunteer who could ride along with them, but the media firestorm erupted before those details could be worked out.
Here now to discuss this is CBN News senior correspondent Jennifer Wishon. Jennifer, Representative Foster told CBN News the situation escalated before his campaign was able to offer any accommodation to the reporter. Hindsight's 20/20, but if he had, say, suggested to bring along a campaign staffer during the ride-along interview, couldn't he have avoided all of this?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I would say, John and Jenna, that it is possible politically that in a gubernatorial Republican primary in Mississippi, it is highly likely that Representative Foster wanted to highlight the fact that he adheres to the so-called Billy Graham rule. But I will also say that, you know, if he is running for the governor's mansion, certainly throughout his campaign, and if he wins the general election, he is going to be approached repeatedly by female reporters seeking comments, seeking interviews with him. him. And so I think it's incumbent upon him to work with his campaign staff to come up with a standard operating procedure so that he can certainly work with female reporters in the future.
Hey, Jennifer, this isn't the first time that this has come up. Vice President Mike Pence has also come under fire for this. Just a few seconds left.
Yeah, absolutely. For some reason, the secular media doesn't get this. They think that it's old-fashioned or old school to want to protect your marriage. But I will say, the reporter said that she felt like a sex object in this particular case. Certainly, female reporters are mistreated out in the field every day, but just as females should demand not to be treated that way, I think it's also incumbent upon us to respect men who want to honor the agreements that they have with their spouses. It's easy to do.
All right, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that report. We'll be back right after the break.
Soldiers destroy the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Centuries of eyewitnesses say the temple treasures survived. But where are they?
They went from Jerusalem to Rome, Rome to Carthage, Carthage to Byzantium.
Historians are silent about what happened to it next.
This is a bad omen.
Hosted and narrated by Gordon Robertson.
So does it still exist today?
CBN Documentaries presents a story of mystery.
Where is it?
Calamity.
Most of the victims were butchered.
And destiny.
The possibility to dig is impossible.
Take a journey to find Treasures of the Second Temple, a CBN Documentaries presentation, coming July 8th.
And finally tonight, the Gulf Coast is bracing for Tropical Storm Barry. Forecasters say it could become a hurricane this weekend.
Yeah, tonight all eyes are on New Orleans, where there's already a lot of flooding after 8 inches of rain fell in just 3 hours there.
This is ridiculous. It looks like Venice out here. Everybody need a boat or something. This is like sad. This is really sad.
The governor of Louisiana declaring a state of emergency as the levee system faces one of its greatest tests since Hurricane Katrina. The Army Corps of Engineers in New Orleans saying it's confident the levees are in good shape, with the Mississippi River expected to reach its highest level in close to 70 years. This was the scene yesterday, winds and rains tearing through homes and a waterspout spotted on Lake Pontchartrain. And officials warn this may just be a warm-up for what's coming.
With more rain in store for the city of New Orleans. This is the time to help us clear debris in front of catch basins.
They're asking people to shelter in place, with some already being ordered to evacuate. The storm is expected to hit landfall somewhere between New Orleans and Houston. Hurricane Harvey still fresh in the minds of many Texans.
We want to make sure that the state of Texas is doing all we can to prepare in advance for this storm.
Yeah, keep those folks in our prayers. Well, that is going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.